So today we are going to talk about exceptions. So what is an exception? What is an error in Java? How we are going to handle exceptions in different ways. So this is a rough hierarchy structure how the exceptions are organized in Java. So for every class, though you write your custom class like, we have written welcome or something here, right? For any class that you write, everything is, default parent is java.lang.object. This is the parent class for every class in Java. So underneath you have a throwable. So underneath you have two types of errors: exceptions, errors. So we will talk about errors after one session or two sessions. Today let's talk about only the right side structure. The throwable, which will go into exceptions, and then exceptions you will have runtime exceptions and other exceptions. It's more of a check exceptions and runtime exceptions. We'll get into much more detail. This is how the typical hierarchy of errors and exceptions in JDK. Now, let's look at. Here. You can look at any of the Java API information on this URL. This is open source. Anybody can go and read this material. So now here you see that throwable. You see here throwable is a class which is here. So that means that parent of throwable is java.lang.object. So this is a class which is a superclass for every class in Java. So now, and here direct known subclasses, that is nothing but error exception. That's what I showed you in the other screen. Under throwable is derived into exceptions and errors. So that is nothing but you see here. So when you go on to the exceptions, now under the exception, you can see these are all so many different classes. Each class is meant for one type of an exception. So you need to read through all the materials. I'll explain you the concept how different exceptions works. So, but each one open a class and look at it and how the things works. So for say if I'm keeping let's look at easy one. So then each exception has its own implementation. So now let's put into the practice how this exception happens, how we are going to manage the exceptions. So in Java world, you will have two types of exceptions. One is checked exceptions, one is unchecked exceptions. So now I'm going to use person class. Okay, I'm removing all the inheritance. We don't need to use inheritance to work with the exceptions.
You're not sharing.
I'm sharing, right?
That's the only graphic.
No, I think you might have a little bit lagged in watching my screen. I'll wait. Is that the case for everybody? Are you able to see my kids?
No, we are on
No, I can't see you.
Yeah, now it's paused.
Are you able to see?
No.
Yes, it is.
We are still on
Okay.
this
Let's look at.
Firefox.
Just me a minute. What happened? Okay. So now we'll have, Java has two types of exceptions. One is checked and another one is unchecked exceptions. So, you can say checked exceptions are compile time exceptions. Both terminology is same. This is one type of exceptions in Java. Another one is unchecked or runtime exceptions. So meaning it's the same. Whether you say unchecked or runtime is similar, and checked or compile time is also similar. So the terminology is same. Now, let's look at only checked exceptions first. So what is checked exception? Meaning, while you are writing your code, it will tell you what could be the possible problem with that code. That is called checked exception. So now let's say, I put into a practice here. Now I'm saying new person. I'm creating a class as a new person, just like in the previous example. Now, if person1 dot get, I'll create one more method in person1. This is the class. Okay. Why I'm getting error there? Additional brace. Okay. So now here I'm creating a class, a method, public. Probably I'll return an object. So per se I'm saying public string. I can't use public string yet. Get first name. Okay. Just like in the previous way, I'm creating a get first name. Return now. This is more of a runtime. Check exceptions. And that is a runtime exception. .txt. Just give me a minute. I'm trying to work out an example. This is also checked exception. Yeah, I think this should be. See, now, check exceptions is something like, when you start writing your code, it will tell you, it will compile your code and tell you in case there's a possibility of an exception. So now here you see, I'm trying to create a file input stream. I mean, we'll get into the IO streams and everything later. Now, whenever this is, standard Java class, file input stream. So whenever I'm trying to create an object, it says unhandled exception type, file not found exception. So that means there is a possibility that in case if there is no hello.txt file, for example, so it will throw an exception. So in case the exception happens, what you do? I mean, there is a potential chance of throwing in a file not found exception. To do that, you have to start to manage the exceptions. So the minimum, the way you can handle exceptions is you can use try, open, and close braces, and write the implementation. Whatever you wanted to write, under the try, write the implementation, and in case something goes wrong in try, use catch block and open the braces. In the catch, you need to tell what kind of exception it can be possible. So in this situation, because file input throws file not found exception. So that's why we are catching file not found exception. And when the exception happens, how do you want to handle? So to handle the next steps, you will use the catch block, how you can manage that exception. Now, in this situation, I mentioned just like, file output and hello.txt. Now, there is no hello.txt file. That means what happens? You will get into exception block. Now, I'm just printing a statement. Exception is occurred. Okay. Let's execute this program. Now you see here, exception occurred because there is no hello.txt file available in all my project or anywhere. So now that's why you see no such file. I mean, this is the exception because I am printing, whatever the whole exception in this line. That's why you see the red line. But, you see our print statement also, exception is occurred. So that means it throws an exception. Now, let's say if I put some file name, some name with the file, right? Any file name. Okay. I'm trying to create some same file name under the same place. Hello.txt. So now some file is available here. Now run the same code. It should, right? Or I think I might give slash. How?
I guess we need to give path of our file.
I mean, I given the complete, it's in the same path, right? Where is that? Let's see. You're right. So hold this part. So it's not the source and main, experiment / hello.txt again. You need to give experiment. I'll explain the files, how to read through files later on. I'm just building a sample here, that's all, to talk about exceptions. I guess some more lines. Did I give right? Yeah. / experiment / hello text. Oh, one letter is wrong in this. Okay, let's leave it there. I mean, I can troubleshoot later on. If something happens, it will go here and execute this exception. And you can have one more block that is finally. So now, what is the advantage of finally? I mean, if something exception happens in try, you can able to do in catch block and handle it. So, but finally is also will be does the same job like finally, but a little bit different. So now let's say I'm keeping finally. So now you see both print statements will be printed, whatever is coming from catch block and whatever is coming from finally block. Now you see exception is occurred and finally. So now, then why should we use catch and finally? If something happens in try block, it will be caught in catch block. And in the catch block, you may get an exception. We don't know. I mean, you might be doing some more statements like, I'm just throwing an exception myself. Throw runtime exception. So new runtime exception with some message. Some exception I'm purposefully throwing. I mean, for the sake of the demo, I'm throwing the purposeful exception. In real scenarios, you may have, you may write some code in catch block, which may write an error again. So in that situation, still the finally block will be executed. So no matter what the catch block does, Java doesn't care. Whatever you define in finally block will be executed. Why we need to have a finally block? So something, when you're using in a real-time applications, though if you might be using database connections open or memories are open, files are open, something like that. So because of the exception happened in catch block, you cannot open in databases and everything and leave it there. So that situation, you can use finally black to clean up the memory or clean up the resources, anything like that. So now let's see how this try catch finally works. So now you see both statements are printed here. I mean, this is coming from runtime exception, the line number, this one. Forget about red lines. But if you look at in the black colored lines, so both lines are printed still. So now, let's say I am doing something. I'm reversing the lines.
Hello, Prashant here, sir.
Yep.
A small doubt, sir.
Yep.
In catch method, you wrote file not found exception, sir. Is it default keyword, sir, or either we put that name, sir?
So this one, file not found exception.
File not found exception in catch, sir.
So this is not default. I mean, anything that you see red color, those are all default keywords reserved by Java.
Okay.
So this one is I can open a class. This is one of the class files given by JDK, Java. I mean, you can open the source code and you can look at the code. This is all coming from JDK. Because of the open source, that's why you can be able to see what they have written inside the class. This is, Java provides a lot of, classes. So, I showed you earlier, right? So these are all the classes are given by JDK. One of the class should be file not found.
If you won't write that, what will happen, sir?
Pardon?
If you won't write that, what will happen, sir?
So you cannot, you cannot, the class, you cannot compile the code. If you don't write this, let's say I'm saying here, some other exception.
Okay.
Array index out of bound exception. Now you see that. The other line will not be compiled. You cannot compile your source code at all. So it says unhandled exception type file not found.
Okay, sir.
So that's whatever the lines of code that you write in try block, those will potentially throw some errors. In case these are kind of a checked exceptions. So that's why you can have try, catch, and finally. Now I'm trying to demo the other one. That's not easy to demo. See, I just reversed the lines. It will not work because whenever this line is coming, it will throw an exception. So that's why this line will never reach, because if some the file is not found, it gets into catch exception. Once inside the catch exception, we are immediately throwing an exception, runtime exception, meaning at any given point of time, this line will not be executed. So that's why you will get unreachable code. So that means you can never reach this code. So in Java, you cannot write a dead code which cannot be reached. So now, instead of that, what I'm saying here is if on the top in the method I am declaring my own variable Boolean flag equal to true. Now, inside just to mimic that scenario, I am writing something like if flag equal to true, then show exception. So now you see, there is no compile error because whenever flag is false, it will execute this line. That means in one scenario, the highlighted line will reach. That's why you don't see any error. Now just because of true, right? I put it true, immediately it will come into line number 19 and line number 20 will be executed. Meaning in the catch block, it will throw an exception. So let's see what has happened now. See this. So only finally is executed. That means though the catch block throws an exception, still finally block is executed. Meaning, so finally block will be executed no matter what happens in your overall program with different types of errors. So that's how you can use try, catch, finally. Now, any questions?
No question.
Okay.
No
So now
questions.
let's see. Yeah?
No questions.
Okay, sure. So now I will remove catch block. So now in this situation, I will remove everything. Let's implement this in a little bit different way. Now, in the person class, I am defining get file, something like that. I am defining a method get file. Now, I'm writing something like this. So return type of this is file input string. Now here what I'm doing is I'm just creating a file input string from the file and returning it.
The G get kind of touched.
No, it will work. So now you see here. Oh, gee, okay. So now in this example, you still see this is error saying unhandled exception, file not found. So now I don't want to handle the exception inside this method just the way we handled in the previous scenario example. So here you can say try catch and do that the way we just explained. So now I don't want to do that. Then what you can do is throws file not found exception. So that means if you don't want to handle the exceptions inside that method, you can throw them to a method, whoever is calling this get file method. They have to handle with the exceptions coming from this method. Now, let's come here and see how that is. Person. I'm creating a new person object. Now, person1 dot get file. Now you will see this line is giving a problem because the error handling mechanism from get file method comes into main method because in the get file we did not handle that exception. So now here you can do the similar way, whatever we did earlier, right? We can implement same concept here. Similarly, same thing like in the previous way. So now why should we do like this? So whenever the exception happens, you may want to handle the exception differently in welcome class. And let's say if I go to, go over this class. So here also, let's say I created another method. Okay. So I created another class. Here I want to handle, void handle files. Some method name I'm creating here. Now here I'm creating a person object. Now person one dot get file. So now I'm seeing the another error here. So I got the error here because it also says unhandled exception. Whoever is the class calling that method will get the same exception handling mechanism. So now I'm adding try catch. So in the catch here, I may want to do a different thing. I mean, for the demo purpose, I'm keeping a different print statement. Handling files in closed. Now, in the welcome, I'm saying some other statement. So now here you can see, whatever the print statement that we put in exception handling, see that handling files in main. Now, similarly, I am creating an object of Govardhan now. Now, what did I do here? Oh, just like this I'm handling it. Okay. Now here I'm saying Govardhan1 dot handle files. So now I don't get exception here. You see this line, I'm not getting an exception here because in the handle files, I'm handling the exception. Okay? So get file as an exception, but I'm handling in Govardhan class. That's why. So somewhere in the chain, you need to handle the exception. So now let's execute this program. You should see two different statements. So now you see handling files in main, handling files in Govardhan. So the second statement comes from here. So let's say here. So I don't want to handle in Govardhan also. I mean, in this class also, I don't want to handle the exception. Still, you can do that. I am just returning some file input. Okay. So I'm saying return whatever the input string coming from the person one method, I'm returning the same thing. So now you see here, it throws the same problem because I'm not handling the exception in Govardhan class also. In that situation, because I don't want to handle here, so still I can throw this exception to whoever calls this method. Okay, throws, not throws. File not format. Now you see, there is no problem with this method. Because I am not handling the exception here, though it comes from get file, I am throwing back to whoever calls this method, they need to handle. That's why now you see a problem in the welcome file because nobody in the chain is handling the problem. So in the handle file, we are not handling it. In the get file, we are not handling it. So that's why your exception propagates across the chain. Now, in the main method, somewhere you need to handle that exception. So now, this is how, you can handle the exception and, do whatever you wanted to do in catch block. So now, let's execute and see. It will print both different statements. That's all. So that's how you can, use try, catch, finally, and propagate your error across the chain using throws. Any questions so far?
No questions.
No question.
Okay. Now, let's say another thing is, let's say if you don't want to, you don't know, you don't want to do like this, file not found exception. You can do exception also. Straight away, you can write exception. Exception is the parent class for every type of exception in Java. So that means even though you say exception or file not find exception, it will come into the same group because file not found exception is one of the child in exception. So that's why you can still use this one. So, but you cannot use some other exceptions like, I showed you previously, array bound. I'm just giving some exceptions. There are so many different types of exceptions. This will not work. You still get the problem. Either you need to give a specific exception catch block or you can give parent of that.
Like if you give exception in that, it can handle any kind of exception.
Yes.
Okay.
So you can handle any type of exception. So let's look at some other exceptions. I don't remember on top of my head. Check exceptions in Java. I just want to know a few more in a file path. That's okay. Not this one. I want to replicate multiple exceptions and tell you what it is. Okay, probably this could be it. Okay, he showed me the same thing, but that's fine. No, I don't want that. HTTP URL, I guess. Maybe I'll try a different one. In the person class. So I'm creating a new method. I'm giving it a try. I'm creating a new method in the person class. Connect Facebook. Something like that. I'm giving. So here what I'm trying to do is from my program, I'm trying to connect to the Facebook. HTTP URL. Yeah. Okay, I got it. New HTTP URL. Forget about what I'm trying to do here. No. HTTP URL connection dot create So I'll copy some syntax. I don't need this one. So now here I'm saying this is another Java class, Java predefined class. So here you see I'm saying new URL, and I'll give some URL here. New URL, that is nothing but facebook.com something. I mean, you don't need to give a real URL. I'm giving a fake URL. So now you see there are some, URL cannot be resolved to twice. That's okay. So now you see the problem here. Because I'm opening an exception, it says unhandled exception. So this is again a type of an IO exception. Basically what happens when I'm trying to communicate with the Facebook, if network is down, if something goes wrong, I make it an exception. How do you handle if that situation happens? That is nothing but IO exception. So now, here I don't want to handle any exception, just like the previous condition. So now what I'm doing, I'm throwing IO exception. Whatever it comes from this method, I'm just throwing out. So whoever is using this class, they need to manage that exception. Now, come here and in the person one, the same object, I'm trying to connect to the Facebook. Now, and I am changing the catch exception to the previous one, file not found. So it doesn't work because I was able to address the first line in the try block, how to handle that exception. But I'm not handling another exception. So, and that means you can add additional catch blocks one by one to handle that exception. So now I'm saying catch block to handle IO exception. Now Facebook exception. So now it will work. Because I put 2 catch blocks, one for each, to handle those exceptions. Now let's see how this works. So handling for it did not go to Facebook exception. Let's see why it did not go. So probably I've given the proper URL, I guess. Instead of I'll give some junk. Why? It should throw an exception because I'm mimicking that. So anything wrong I'm doing here? No, I'm doing right only. Okay. Probably I need to give one more statement here because I open a connection. I mean, this is more of a syntax we will get to know later. Connect. So this will throw an error. Yeah. Connect. And is it coming here first of all? Connection.get input stream. I will check. I mean, ideally it should throw an error because I'm giving no URL here, all dummy, so it should fire exception. I'll check it. So but basically that's how you can have multiple catch blocks to handle each one. So per se, if you don't want to handle like that, so you can simply say exception and remove this. Still, this will work. I mean, this will handle both situations. Now, earlier example, you see a problem. I mean, if I keep like this, you see a problem here. Because what happens is, anything happens in these two lines, it will be caught by first exception because file not found exception and IO exception are children of an exception. So automatically those will be get into the first catch block, meaning the second catch block will never reach. Because anything happens, it will be handled in the first catch block. That's why you see unreachable code. So you will never reach this catch block. So that's the error. I mean, all child exceptions should be first and the parent should be next. If something happens in IO exception, it will be caught here. If file not found exception happens, there is no catch block, automatically it will come into final exception. This is how you can mix and match and play around with checked exceptions. Any questions?
No questions.
No questions.
Okay. So that's all for today. And tomorrow, please go through today's exception material and all that stuff. Tomorrow, I will cover runtime exceptions. Please read enough information about what is runtime exceptions, how they work. So I'll explain them tomorrow on that. And if time permits, I will talk about basics of collection framework. Read through the minimum around what is collection framework, how they work.
Yeah, got it.
So if you have any questions, I'll answer. Otherwise, you can answer for today.